Okay, for the second recording, we're going to go through the Folkman and Lazarus article here, and the good news I have to share with you about this one is this one I thought was a much better article where they went through things. I'm going to try to explain things. Same rules apply as far as what's supposed to be done. We like the intro, a good literature review, maybe some key points here as far as appraisal. I like the way on 992, as you guys have pointed out, just define what a cognitive appraisal is. Maybe even give an example yourself on when you've had a cognitive appraisal, on how you're feeling things are, primary and secondary. Give an example of that for me. So a personal example where you've done a cognitive primary. So a personal example of that I think would be good, just to show me you know what that means. You can give me the definition and then give me an example of primary and secondary, and most importantly, coping. How you deal with things. We have process-oriented, which I think is important, and then the context of how the person does with the context there. And very important is at the very bottom of page 993, first column, two major things that came out of the Lazarus and Folkman research of the 80s. Two ways people have of dealing with things: emotion-based coping and problem-based coping. And I really want you to, more than anything, have a real understanding of this. How many of you have good friends you can just talk about anything to and they'll just sit there and listen to, even if you have a big problem? That would be called emotion-based coping. Listening to people and validating them. Active listening, probably even on some of your jobs. You probably do emotion-based coping. Give me an example of that. So define it and give an example of emotion-based coping. Give example from your personal life. And then problem-based coping. For me, problem-based coping is when I'm having a problem with medicines or my asthma or something like that. I call a healthcare professional, a pharmacist or one of my doctors, and I say, I'm having this problem, I'm looking for a solution. So problem-based focused or problem-based coping. Coping is how you're trying to deal with the problem at hand. Having other people listen and emotionally support you is one way, the social support, the psychoneuroimmunology. Problem-based is where you actually try to get some solutions to things. So they do a nice job of saying what the goals of the study are, and they recruit people in their method section and kind of go through things. What I want to explain here just a little bit is this idea that they put across in table 3. They do something very important here that I want to teach you about, called a factor analysis. They give all these statements out to people, and then they want to see what the subscales are. Have you heard of subscales before? Subscales are basically, many times when we talk about things like burnout, there are 3 subscales there: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and a lack of personal accomplishment. How do you come up with subscales? Well, the answer to that question, and in this case, it looks like they actually have like 8 subscales. The way you do that is you use an approach that's based on something called psychometrics. Psycho, P-S-Y-C-H-O, metrics, M-E-T-R-I-C. And in psychometrics, what you do is you actually take all the questions you get from people and you see if there's a clustering of the questions, of how people respond. And the way you do that is, it's called a factor analysis. So they take all these questions and answers, and they come up with different scales. And the way you can tell if a scale is any good is by the reliability, the alpha reliability. Look at the confrontive coping. If anything is above 0.7, that means it's a real subscale. And so what's really classic about this article is they actually come up with very different scales: confrontive coping, distancing, self-controlling, social support, accepting responsibility, escape avoidance, and they have questions to map this: planful problem solving and positive reappraisal. So If you're problem solving, that's probably problem-based coping. If you're seeking social support just to talk things out to a friend, that's probably emotion-based. So see if you can kind of summarize this and see if you can give maybe 3 examples. Actually, there are 8 scales. Let's have you give an example of your own life of 4 from your own life of when you've used 4 of these scales. Give an example for the results. So they do a nice job. It's called a factor analysis. It's part of psychometrics. And they come up with this to really understand better what people are going through. And then if we actually continue on, they do a lot of statistics in this situation. We don't have to go through all of them. Table 7, though, I think would be an important table to understand at the end here. They basically say, well, which one of these coping scales is going to work out the best? And you know something is working out the best if the p-value is significant. You know how to judge p-values? If the p is less than 0.05, it is significant. So for people who have positive reappraisal, if you've lost a job, if you've had a problem with your life, if you can do positive reappraisal, you actually tend to have better outcomes than if you can't do positive reappraisal. Same thing for planful problem solving. Things that don't work as well, seeking, accepting responsibility, escape avoidance, distancing yourself doesn't work too well, even self-control. So this is a classic article. It really illustrates the ideas behind how people cope with things. So what I'd like you to do is basically summarize the main ideas behind it, give a couple of examples of these things from your own life, and then you have basically 2 weeks to send me drafts. This article was a good article, and it was done in the case of doing a factor analysis just to see if there are subscales on emotion-based coping and problem-based coping. The emotion-based coping is something psychology people should be very good at, and it goes back to the field of psychoneuroimmunology, because just listening and validating people, that can really help them out and help their immune system out. So thank you very much. That is lecture number 2.